Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Wednesday, the 15th of October, 2025. Today is day 740 since October 7th of 2023. There's good and bad in terms of the ceasefire agreement. Yesterday, Israel said that they were going to cut the numbers of trucks from 600 to 300 in order to sanction Hamas, because Hamas has not yet returned all of the remaining bodies of those who were taken captive to Israel. This was a part of the ceasefire agreement, so Israel's been saying Hamas is in violation. But today, Israel backtracked and said they would send in all 600 trucks and that they would open the Rafah border with Egypt to allow Palestinians to be able to leave. Turkish President Erdogan said the humanitarian aid entry into Gaza has accelerated and that nearly 350 of the trucks that Turkey had sent did enter Gaza, and that there were more than 400 waiting for entry in a post on social media that happened tonight. An analyst gave us an update specifically on the implementation of the 20-point plan, and this is what they shared. They said, in addition to the hostage bodies and the aid headaches, creation of that international stabilization force, I'm calling it ISF, the International Stabilization Force, it's going in a lot of directions as of Wednesday evening, Gaza, Israel time, but it's not necessarily moving forward. The ISF, or something similar to it, under another name, deploying is necessary for aid to be sustainable and effective for anybody taking over administration of Gaza from Hamas and the Israeli Defense Forces, for separating Hamas from the IDF with the presumptive goal to prevent the resumption of the war, for further Israeli withdrawal. It's currently, the IDF has withdrawn all the way to the yellow line, and for Hamas members to disarm, reintegrate, or depart under the Trump plan. Now, President Trump did not stay long enough in Egypt to get the assembled leaders there to begin working on this international stabilization force. Now, it is being worked on, but there's kind of less interest in different places. Here's three different areas where it maybe perhaps has fizzled away or where it's being worked on. One, France and Germany and perhaps other European governments are trying to get a UN Security Council resolution from New York to set up the UN mandated force. It's unclear how Germany and France see a UN mandate as helping, given how long that will add to the process of getting a force deployed, plus longstanding Israeli antipathy for anything related to the United Nations. Two, Egypt has its Qatar and Turkey mediators, plus Hamas, and Israeli reps still working quietly at Sharm el-Sheikh. They're talking about how this international stabilization force might work despite Israeli and Hamas denials, but quite possibly with input from officials representing the UAE, Jordan, Indonesia, Malaysia, maybe even Italy. All have said that they might contribute to boots on the ground. Third, the mid-level officials from potential donor countries, plus Israel and Qatar, are discussing in the United Kingdom how to deploy a force. In addition to their more above-board discussions about how to aid reconstruction, how that can be regularized and funded, these talks are at the UK Foreign Office, Countryside Estate at Wilton Park in Sussex. And President Donald Trump told CNN's Jake Tapper that he would consider allowing Israel to renew fighting in Gaza in case Hamas would uphold its commitments as a part of the ceasefire deal, in case they don't uphold their commitments as a part of the ceasefire deal with Israel. Trump is saying, as soon as I say the word, the fighting can resume. Now, CNN and numerous other outlets reported that Trump said today he would consider allowing Netanyahu to resume military action in Gaza if Hamas refuses to uphold its side of the bargain. They told CNN that Israeli forces could return to the streets as soon as I say the word. What's going on with Hamas, that'll be straightened out quickly, the president said in a brief telephone call. Trump also yesterday said if Hamas does not disarm, we will disarm them, and it will happen quickly and perhaps violently. So Trump added this had been communicated to Hamas through intermediaries and that Hamas had agreed to disarm as per the 20-point proposal. Netanyahu said yesterday that all hell breaks loose if Hamas does not disarm. Other news in terms of the ceasefire agreement, keep in mind that the events of yesterday, Tuesday, what happened in Israel and Gaza. Hamas turned only 4 dead bodies over on Monday. Israelis, particularly the hostage issue protesters against Bibi, blamed him for giving away all of Israel's leverage by releasing Palestinian detainees. These families of hostages and bodies held demanded that Netanyahu stop aid deliveries to Gaza because Hamas was in violation of the agreement. Netanyahu responded and said aid would be reduced because of so few bodies returned. Kogat later turned into a more concrete reduction, and Wednesday's entries were supposed to go from 600 to 300. Later, Tuesday, Hamas turned over 4 more bodies to the Red Cross and said it would turn over another 4 today on Wednesday. The 4 plus on Tuesday plus the 4 on Monday meant 8. But we kind of had to wait to see whether or not Kogat and Hamas would follow through. Hamas might be dragging their feet, waiting for an international force to separate them from the IDF, but Bibi indeed may see cutting aid as a win-win for him vis-a-vis both his Israeli critics and Trump. So there's still a lot up in the air. I have to say, of the 4 bodies that were returned on Tuesday, the IDF said that the Red Cross had retrieved them. The remains were in coffins. They were handed over to the Israeli military last night. The transfer came after Israel warned it would restrict aid. The Palestinian armed group handed back 20 living and 4 deceased hostages on Monday. The remains of 45 deceased Palestinians were handed back to Gaza on Tuesday. Now, 4 more bodies were handed in yesterday. The Israeli military said that the National Institute of Forensic Medicine identified 3 of those bodies as Israeli hostages, but they concluded that one of the bodies was not Israeli. In fact, I read reports that the body was actually a Palestinian who was believed to be collaborating with Israel. Around 4 p.m. Eastern time today, the Israeli news reported that the remains of 2 deceased hostages also arrived in Israel from Gaza. So that would make a total of 10 bodies minus the one that was Palestinian, 9 hostages' bodies having been returned. In Israel, the defense establishment clarified, contrary to reports that the Rafah crossing did not open yesterday. They said preparations are ongoing. A security official told BBC humanitarian aid would not pass through Rafah, and no such agreement was reached at any stage. Aid is entering Gaza through other crossings, such as the Kerem Shalom. Yesterday, Israeli officials suggested the Rafah crossing was staying closed due to Hamas's failure to hand over more bodies. But then today, Haaretz reported that Israel is expected to allow the border crossing to reopen in coming days. 2 sources said they anticipated it opening on Thursday. Extreme right youth in Israel are blocking Jerusalem Square, calling to release Jewish prisoners. These are extreme right activists from a group that's known as the Hilltop Youth, an extremist settler movement. They've been blocking a central square in Jerusalem, calling for Israel to release Jewish prisoners. Over the past 24 hours, 9 people in Gaza were killed. An additional 35 were wounded. The International Committee of the Red Cross said yesterday it might take considerable time to hand over the remains of the remaining dead Israeli hostages that are still in Gaza. While the ceasefire has largely held, Palestinian civil defense told BBC that 7 people were killed on Tuesday in 2 separate incidents by the IDF. Meanwhile, Hamas fighters demonstrated their reasserting control in Gaza. There are reports of masked gunmen executing 8 Palestinians in public, triggering fear and outrage among residents. Hamas maintains the fighters are working to restore security and eliminate lawlessness, but many fear that the group is using the chaos to settle scores with rivals and to silence critics. The death toll in Gaza is now at least 67,869 people killed by Israeli military operations since October 7th. In the U.S., President Trump said that Hamas disarmament won't need U.S. military intervention. He said, "We want Hamas to give up their weapons." And U.S. billionaire Ackman donated $1 million to a PAC opposing Zohran Mamdani. He donated to Defend New York City, a super PAC to stop Mamdani's campaign for New York mayor. With less than 3 weeks to the election, this is the largest donation to the PAC, founded by Jason Meister, a former Donald Trump campaign advisor, who once said January 6th should be a national holiday to honor American heroes. Closing with updates on Christians in the Middle East, I wanted to let you know the Palestinian Christian village of Taibeh was attacked again on Sunday. Jewish settlers came into the village. They burned another car. I was there in August. I met the young man who the car belonged to, and he texted me pictures, and it looked almost like an explosion. It was completely torched. There was once again graffiti written in Hebrew on walls outside of the Palestinian homes. These threats and attack continue to provoke and to terrorize in the occupied West Bank. There's little, if any, recourse for families who suffer. The note I got from the village said that a few of the olive trees belonging to private Palestinian families from the village were able to be harvested because Palestinians could not have access without fear of being attacked by Israeli settlers. Pray for Taibeh and raise awareness about the stories of what's happening in the West Bank, standing up against settler extremism. Look at some of the articles CMEP has written and tell your members of Congress that something must be done to stop settlement expansions and extremism that is causing so much harm to Palestinians. 2 events I wanted to let you know about from Churches for Middle East Peace. We're having a vigil of lament and action, talking about 2 years of war in the Holy Land. That'll be on October 22nd at noon, East Coast time. We'd invite you to join us for that. And if you haven't signed up for the Let Children Live campaign, it's a campaign for individuals and churches and groups where if you sign up, you'll receive the name of a living Palestinian child, either in Gaza or the occupied Palestinian West Bank. We're calling people to pray for them and to advocate that children would be allowed to live. That's the update from the day. May God go before us in the name of Christ. Amen.